wars. And along great wars have always lied at least one or two great battles. World War II faced many great battles, but one of the most notable battles was the Battle of Normandy. Codename for that battle was Operation Neptune. Battle of Normandy, their goal was to recapture German-occupied France, which Adolf Hitler and his forces took some years before. Throughout this speech, I'll be presenting the executioning, the planning, and the aftermath of how all they went down, or some parts of it. Some examples here, I'll be like distinguishing the boys from the men, how Germany had to fight a two-front war after this battle. The Russians were originally fighting on the east side, and the Allied powers are now starting to fight on the west side. And that was a huge turning point for the Allied powers. So prepping for this was not an easy task. The Soviets were trying to push the United States and the Allies to fight on the west side because they were taking many heavy casualties on the west side. In the reference material, America at War, even if Britain and USA had been able to at the time, they would have incurred the same amount of casualties as the Soviets. So this shows that the Allies weren't really ready to prepare and fight for the war. So after the Soviets said time and time, they finally said, all right, let's start fighting. At first, when they started planning, ideas were thrown all around and nothing was really happening. A lot of arguments began. So they created these planners to start helping out. D-Day by Stephen Ambrose stated that the jobs of the planners were to make sure there's as much information as possible. So what type of strategies were to use, when and where this would happen, like everybody had a certain job. And still, arguments would still break out. For example of a planner like Eisenhower, his job was to determine when and where this would happen. Okay, so it was finally decided that on June 5th, 1944, the Allies would invade the beaches of Normandy. When it came up to June 5th, actually, weather conditions were so bad that they had to reschedule and change it to June 6th, 1944. Because it would have been very hard to get onto the beaches because the Germans already kind of found out what was going on, and they set up mines and all this kind of, and all these kind of ways to fight that. But after the plan was set in stone and they knew what they were going to do, Eisenhower was so confident in his plan that he made it very well known. So in the book D-Day by Stephen Ambrose, it stated that Eisenhower said, "The operation is planned only as victory, and that's the way it's going to be. We're going down there, and we're throwing everything we have into it, and we're going to make sure it's a success." So you can tell how cocky he was and how he knew that this was going to happen, like how smart, how well thought out this plan was. So planning did take a long time, but it was well worth it in the long run. D-Day was on June 6, 1944, with an Operation Neptune. So the Battle of Normandy itself was called Operation Neptune, and within that Operation Neptune was in Operation Overlord. Operation Overlord was to reconquer Europe. Operation Neptune was to conquer Normandy, and then D-Day was the day it all started on. As stated by U.S. history, to explain a little more, Operation Overlord was codename for the Allied invasion of Northwest Europe. This assault phase, the establishment of a secure foothold was known as Operation Neptune. So in other words, to make it sound a little more better, Operation Neptune began on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and ended on June 30th, 1944, when the Allies had established a foothold in Normandy. And then Operation Overlord began on D-Day as well, and continued until the Allied forces crossed over the River Seine on August 19th. As stated by historyplace.com, when everybody got there, for German field commanders on the scene, the first minutes of the invasion brought great alarm and great confusion. So they knew it was coming, but nobody knew exactly when and where the Germans were going to be attacked. And they're coming from left and right all over Normandy. This just confused them. The planning was working out the way they had it set up. So the plan Eisenhower set up went well, and obviously they confused the Germans. And so many Allied soldiers from Allied forces fought from all around. The plan worked well. Sorry, I didn't even repeat that. After the win of the Battle of Normandy, German morale started to drop. They knew that, oh crap, they're fighting from the west side and the east side, so now we're about to get surrounded. that loss was inevitable. This battle led to them to start fighting on both sides. Now, as successful as it seems, many lives were lost, and many people died, casualties, civilians, either from Europe, and then Allies powers and Axis powers. As stated by the D-Day Encyclopedia, the Allies approximately lost nearly 37,000 people just on D-Day alone. And the total German losses are really unclear, but from what's told, said around 4,000 to 9,000 men, which isn't much, but it's still a big victory for the Allied powers, because they finally got on the beaches in Normandy. Some examples of the losses in Canada: there's a state called Manitoba, and they had a regiment sent to D-Day as well. As stated by the article Manitoba and the Great Crusade, casualties for the day exceeded 130 on D-Day. 57 Manitobas, along with 29 non-Manitobas within the regiment, made the ultimate sacrifice of death for their country and for the Allies to win. 86 Manitoba sons were lost on a single day. I mean, that's just kind of sad to think, someone's son just died, but of course for a greater cause and to help secure and win the World War II, or the Battle of Normandy, which led to the win of World War II. The invasion of Normandy, the Battle of Normandy, along with Operation Overlord, Operation Neptune, and the most famous name that started it all, D-Day, was very successful and saved millions of lives, but at a very big price. Many lives were lost, but we all look to them as our heroes. And Operation Neptune will be one for the books, and will always be remembered as one of the greatest operations ever. Thank you.